Hello, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a spiritual conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm Megan Rounds, spiritual connector and founder of Mystical Mashup. Welcome to today's show. I'm so happy to see you here. Today's guest is also known as the Energy Wizard because, as some of you may have experienced firsthand during his monthly show, Wednesdays with the Wizard, he's got some mad energy channeling and healing skills. What you may not know is that he's a retired software engineer who hails from Lake Oswego, Oregon. He's been married for 42 years to Marianne, who is also a light worker and member of the lab. His daughter, Lauren, a moderator here in the lab, is one of his 3 adult children, and he is also father to a cat, a dog, and grandfather to 4 amazing grandkids. In addition, he's a world traveler who has visited 4 of the Earth's chakras. He has been a guest on this show 2 times previously, once in 2018 and once with Marianne in 2019. Those conversations are definitely worth checking out, and just search for the dates, which I will put up here. There, yeah, I guess that is the right one. Okay, search for these dates here in the lab, the dates that I've just posted, or for his name if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Energy Wizard Mark Vollbrecht. There we go! Woohoo! Oh my goodness.
So
Hi,
am I
Mark.
live?
You are live.
Okay.
Woo! Yay. Well, welcome and Happy New Year, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Oh my goodness. How are you today?
Good.
Good.
So I've got a couple of comments on your feel-good stories,
Yay!
if that's okay.
Of course.
One is on the first one with the doing good acts. It's not directly related to it, but it's kind of like, you're talking about them actually, we know it, but, they did the study to show it. Local medical group that I'm in for my health care, they send out a monthly newsletter. Mm-hmm. And a couple of months ago, they sent out one with an article on using essential oils to help with things.
Really?
I was like, yeah, I mean, this is like, a big mainstream, medical system. They have a hospital and, and of course, the clinics and, all that stuff. And it's like, I saw that and go, what?
There are even some hospitals that use Reiki. They're really starting to open up to some of these things that used to be considered unusual, let's say.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to hear that. That's really cool. And was it an article on different essential oils that you can use and their benefits, or how did they position?
Yeah, I mean, they just talked about different ones you could use. Lavender, for relaxation. They mentioned one, I think, that would help with like hay fever or something like that. I can't remember what they all were, but they had like a half a dozen for different things.
Oh, well, I think that's great. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, for sure. And it would be fun. I would like to see more good news stories about those, about essential oils, and there are some things about healthcare, like hospitals and things like that, incorporating some alternative approaches as well. Yeah, dig around for some of those. Cool. Thanks for bringing that up.
And then on the garbage disposal composter, which is kind of cool because it's right in the sink. There's actually a device out there which we bought that's a standalone that you put your garbage into, and then you run it, and it actually turns it into compost inside like a couple of hours.
Really? Yeah. Is it a spinner kind of thing, or that's a traditional compost thing, right?
That's traditional. Yeah, it goes through a heating cycle and then a grinding cycle is what it calls it.
Oh, that's really cool. I love hearing about things like that. I like it when they try to make, they being the inventor people, create things that are fairly user-friendly to replace those things that we've become pretty dependent upon and aren't necessarily beneficial to the environment. So,
cool. Now, you can't put avocado pits in it.
That one really surprised me. And
Yeah.
bones. You know?
And bones, yeah, yeah. They say there's certain things you don't want to put in it, but
Right.
it's still, a lot does go into it. And we run it like every day, every other day, something like that, quite often.
Cool. Now,
Because it doesn't have a big container for holding stuff,
that was one of the things,
but still,
I don't know how much this container that I mean, I showed the picture of it and it fits under a sink.
yeah.
So it seems like it takes up a fair amount of space. So is that 4 weeks worth of compost by a conventional family of, let's say, 5 or 4?
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
I like that thing has like a sensor to tell you when it's getting full. It has a sensor to tell you if your sink is about to flood, because apparently that can happen. That hasn't
Oh,
fortunately
yeah.
happened to us at this point. And then a thing, that whole self-cleaning component. So I'm like, they're really thinking
Yeah.
about how to really make this an appeal for the masses. So that's really cool. Okay, so now I have to
Yeah.
ask, did the clown one have something related to you and your
No, afraid
experiences too?
not.
Oh man. Oh, because I'm happy that the other two did resonate, because that's, I always want it to be something that kind of relates to the guest, but I'm like, well, these don't necessarily relate to you, but they just seem really fun. That clown one, oh man, I really wish somebody would have done that when I was working in HR. That would have made my day. It is not fun to hold those
Yeah.
meetings at all.
Yeah. I guess the question I have is how do you know ahead of time that you're going to be terminated?
Right. Yeah.
Because, I mean,
He
the last
just,
company I worked for, everything was going fine. And all of a sudden one day they started calling people into offices and they're being terminated, and
well, there are sometimes signs, and I know this because the last place that I had worked at in HR, I was fairly new, and I found this whole stack of folders, and they were really nice folders. And so I thought, well, I'll put these in there for new employee orientation types of things. And so I'm walking through the halls, and people were looking at me like, and I didn't know
oh,
why. And before I had
oh,
started, like maybe a year earlier, they had a massive layoff, and everybody who was laid off had one of those folders. So this time
uh,
they thought I was going to lay people off again, and everybody was freaking out. Yeah, they must have just thought I was the angel of death or something, because I just start and I'm walking around with these folders, and I'm like, awesome. At least somebody told me eventually, well after the fact, like a month or two later, I finally
oh.
learned why everybody's freaking out when I'm in the room, But you're right. A lot of times they don't want the employee to know. This guy had known some of the signs. Well, and I think it was just that you can have somebody with you. And if that's a law and they have to say it, when else are they going to ask you to bring a support person or animal
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah. It's
Hi, we
like,
want to give you a raise. You want to bring a support person or a support animal with you?
yeah.
And if that were the case, I bet they would have thrown a party with the clown,
Yeah.
Anyway, for those of you just joining us, that's one of the good news stories. If you missed it, you should watch it, because it's a cool little story that, I really hope gets adopted here in the States. But so all of that aside, what's going on in your world?
Not a whole lot. Just hanging out.
Well, so this is now your third appearance on one of the mashups.
Right.
The first one was with you and me, and you talked a lot about your spiritual journey, which is fascinating and amazing. And then the second one was with your wife, Marianne, and that
Yeah.
was on location in Hawaii. So it's like my first on location vacation mashup with two people before I could do more than one person at a time, which now I can, but back then I couldn't. So it worked out really well, and that was a really fun conversation. So we talked about a couple of things that you might like to talk about today. And do you want to mention what you have done?
Oh. No. Actually, I haven't done it yet.
Oh, okay. Mark's going to do
Okay.
something really cool.
Well, I'm just going to send out energy to everybody watching the video, either live or on replay. And the energy I'm going to be sending out is angelic realm energy.
Which is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I kind of like it because it's not a specific energy per se, because it's the angelic realm. So whichever frequency of that resonates most with a person was what they'll get.
And as soon as you, even before you said angelic realm, I started feeling something. So I don't know if, we've talked before about time and how I don't want to necessarily go and repeat that conversation, although I would, but I don't, anybody interested
Well,
can watch that first mashup too. But it's almost like a cool, refreshing, very light, misty breeze. I don't really have the best words to describe how it feels for me, but for those of you watching, if you're feeling something specific, make a mention of it in the comments. It'd be really cool to know.
yeah, and I can't see any of the comments,
That's right.
by the way. So
I will read them or post them, so you'll know, if there's anything specific to the energy that people are posting, or any questions that you have of Mark is another thing to do.
yeah, and as before, afterwards, I'll go back through the comments on the video and
Me too.
and reply as needed.
Yes, definitely. I do that too. So just know that even if I'm not mentioning your comment, it will be seen. And if you ask a question or have a specific comment that we should respond to, we will. Awesome. Well, so a couple of things that I had mentioned or that we had talked about before. And one of the first things that we talked about that you might want to discuss today is how it's like you'd always been a light worker. Or at least that's what Marianne has used to describe you. Oh, he's always been a light worker.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Crystal Ann has even touched on this and mentioned before. Being a light worker doesn't mean that you're psychic or that you do readings and things like that. Being a light worker is more about doing good and more of just a state of mind.
Yeah. I mean, hence the name light.
Yeah.
You're like bringing light, not necessarily in a literal way where you enter a room and the room glows.
Yeah. Yeah. And people that you may not think of being light workers, someone like Mother Teresa. No one would ever consider her a light worker, but what she did was light work, helping people.
Yeah, I would say she may not have thought of herself as a light worker.
No, and probably not.
Yeah.
That's just, people that don't think about it. Years back, there was a 7-Eleven that I'd go to where I was living. And there was a guy that worked there that every time you go, he goes, hi, how's it going? He's just very bubbly, friendly personality. And that's not much, but if you walk into that store in a not very good mood, that his joy or whatever is going to be infectious.
Totally.
And you're going to be happy. So here again, I'm sure that guy didn't consider himself a light worker.
Probably not. It reminds me of. Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say that one of my previous jobs was working at a transportation company, and we had a bus service, and one of our bus operators sang. And he was like the coolest guy. You'd walk onto his bus and he's like, hello, how are you today? And he'd learn names of the regular people, and then he'd sing songs on occasion, and people would comment about how happy his presence made them. If they had a bad day at work, this guy's singing might have annoyed some people, but you couldn't get annoyed by this guy because he was always happy. He took his job very seriously in that he wanted to lift the moods of the people who traveled on his bus.
Yeah.
I would take his bus.
Yeah. So there's some things that, before I would have considered myself a light worker, things that happened. Years ago, talking years ago, shortly after we got married, we were, having a little bit of financial trouble.
As many
can happen with anybody.
Yep.
Yeah. And we got, and we were having trouble making house payments. And we got a phone call saying, you need to get this caught up or we're going to start foreclosing.
Ooh.
On the house. Yeah.
That's scary.
That's good. Well, yeah, Marianne got all freaked out. Well, I wasn't home at the time. She got freaked out because she took the call.
Oh.
And then yeah, and I got home and said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It'll work out." It's like, it's like I had no reason. There was nothing that I knew of per se that would make me say, "Don't worry about it." It was just the feeling. I guess I just knew.
Yeah. So you had the sense that,
The sense,
this is something to trust and that it's all going to be fine.
Although at the time, you said it was anything to do with, psychic abilities or something like that, I would have thought you were crazy.
Well, yeah, because you weren't in that space maybe consciously.
Yeah. And so it's things like that would happen that, you start looking back at it, 30 years later and go, oh, that's why I felt that then or did that then.
Well, yeah, and I love hearing what things do you know now that you didn't know then in terms of patterns or things that popped up that started to show that you were on a path that you didn't realize at the time. So, I mean, these stories are wonderful to help recognize, there's a lot that we're just not paying attention to in the moment because we're in life,
Yeah.
But on reflection, it's like, who knew?
Yeah.
So that's a really good example.
Yeah.
So what else is there?
And what else is there?
Not as a challenge, but I'm just wondering, I mean, are there things even earlier than that might reflect that always being a light worker piece?
Well, I mean, I've always been helpful for people. I'm kind of the gentleman holding the door open, but I would hold it open,
Me too.
Man or woman. So I mean, it wasn't,
So what happens when you meet another person who is one of those? Because I've had this experience where I'm opening a door for somebody and they're opening a door for me, and we're both opening the door standing. You go, no, you go, you go, no, you go. Okay, let's go together if we can.
Yeah, eventually someone gives in and goes.
Yeah, otherwise just a lot of people will just walk through in the meantime.
Yeah, and a number of years ago I started, I mean, it's one thing if you're there and you open it for someone, but I started noticing that a door would be closing, someone would be in front of me, go through a door, and the door would close just as I was getting there.
Yeah.
I go, well, gee, if they'd have held it just a second longer, I could have gone right through. And so I started making sure if I knew somebody was close behind me, I'll hold on to second here and leave it open, so it's open for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really good observation I mean, I do the same thing, and not everybody does, and I've recognized that from some of the experiences you just said, like sometimes the door's shutting right as I'm getting there,
Well,
and I don't think it's intentional.
No, it's not. I mean, they're going through. They didn't look to see if there's someone walking up right behind them.
Yeah. Yep. And some people just, I don't know. For me, it's always been an important thing to hold doors open for people when they're nearby. And sometimes I wonder if there's a bit of a power struggle. It's not even power struggle. It's like sometimes men, when I hold the door open, don't want to walk through because it grates up against their upbringing, let's say.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not trying to prove anything. It's just a nice gesture.
Yeah.
But it's always been something that's really been in my practice, without really even knowing I was doing it until I started to recognize it, in part because I do it with my husband and my daughter around, and I notice that my husband, it's not his go-to thing, and I don't think it's because he wants to be a jerk, although sometimes I may have said that. It's like, it's that because it's just something that's ingrained in me, and I don't remember my parents teaching me that. It's just something I always thought was a nice thing to do. And
Yeah.
I hope one day my daughter picks up on it. So far, she's kind of in that, teenage thing where why should I? And then maybe I will because I want to be nice, but today I don't feel like being nice, so I'm not going to. But I think,
Yeah.
that helper piece, are you a person who then people come to or have throughout your life, like to not vent, but maybe to be around because you somehow make them feel better? Have you noticed that as a pattern?
Not particularly.
Well, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because, if you've had this energy I don't even know what energy channeling, I think, is one of the things that you've talked about. Has it always been there? Even if you've always been a light worker, has it always been through an element of energetic exchange? Or are there other aspects that may have been missed, because you weren't really in that mindset at the time, that that have evolved into this really focused energy thing that you do now?
Well, I believe I've always been able to channel the energy. It's just that until I started looking at light worker stuff, I didn't know about it.
Yeah. Well, and
and it's not that I was repressing it.
Sure.
Like some people when they're young, when they can see spirits and talk to them, parents and other people say, "Oh no, it's just your imagination," or they tend to shut down because of what's going on around them, and that I didn't have that, at least not that I remember.
Sure. Were you a person? Go ahead.
I just didn't know to use it.
Well, I also wonder, some people tend to shy away from their gifts when they don't think of them or even realize that they are gifts. Are you a person who has been able to hold space without, whether knowing it or not, for people who are grieving or, like if somebody shows emotion, in the family I grew up in, if you showed emotion, everybody else just kind of wanted to leave the room. And and yet I believe that there are members of my family who are incredibly sensitive in an energy way, like they're empathic or they are highly sensitive, and they not all of them have recognized this in themselves. It's my own belief that they have this, and it's shown up in different ways. But I've seen how some of them continue to really want to put up barriers because it's uncomfortable for them. And I'm curious if you had anything like that earlier that then has transitioned, or maybe not. And this is not me knowing the answer at all. I'm really just curious.
No, I don't think so.
Cool. So,
I mean, it's just yeah.
Well, so I know you mentioned this in a past show, but how did you then know, even though you've always been a light worker, now upon reflection you believe this, in part because Marianne has said it, but how did you recognize then, when did it change? When did it start to change in terms of your own awareness? Or how did it change?
Well, I mean, I guess what the catalyst for the change was getting a reading from someone.
That's right.
And it's not that I was interested in it, but Marianne was going to be getting a reading from this person, and she felt that I should get one too, and she was willing to pay for it for me, so I would, get it.
Do it.
And it was, and it was just like, well, no, if it's that important to you, that's okay. I'll go and pay for it myself.
And so you had a reading, and they basically told you had some pretty amazing abilities, and that.
No.
Okay.
No, because I went in with some questions. It was, I my mother had passed recently, and so one of my questions was, we and she was cremated, and we were what to do with the ashes. So I was asking what to do with the ashes, what she would have done with them. And she goes, well, I don't care. I'm gone.
Doesn't matter to me, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Basic, something like that. And I know there were some other things, but I don't remember what they were now.
So I know we may have touched upon this in a previous conversation, but one of the questions that I've had that I, in general, when I talk to anybody now, is really what are some of the different things that you were interested in along your path? So if it all started with a reading, that may be one thing, but were you interested in metaphysical or spiritual things earlier and just didn't, but like, I'm thinking back when I was a kid, I used to have a book on aliens and a book on Bigfoot and stuff like that. I used to like ghost stories and watch, I can't remember what it's called now, Kolchak the Night Stalker. But I'm trying to piece back to when, how did it all begin for me? And so I'm curious, how are there things from your childhood or youth or things like that that you had interest in that may not have had any meaning at the time? And if not, that's okay. I'm just kind of curious, when did it kick in?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like science fiction. Always have. But I mean, that's aliens. There we go.
Yeah. Well, what kind of science fiction are you talking about? Or like programs or books or things? Ray Bradbury stuff? Or
Ray Bradbury, Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, are the big ones. I think there's something else I was going to say there. I don't remember now.
About sci-fi, or before I threw that at you?
Sci-fi mystery. Yeah, but it's.
Did it ever show up at work in terms of things that you gravitated towards? Do you think there's maybe a connection between your software engineering path?
Well, I think the software engineering path was, it's a good paying job, and it provided a good income.
So the practical aspects of life.
and spirit guided me, from one job to the next. Although I wouldn't have thought so at the time.
Well, say more about that.
What do you mean? Well, I mean, like, transitioning between one job. I'd work in one place. A person left there and went to work for another company. And a few months later, they called and said, "Hey, how would you like to come work here?"
So you had these opportunities kind of fall in your lap in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
That type of thing. It's because I had that job, and I had that job because of some other people I knew. I knew about that job.
And I love that. I mean,
it's just, those little things that we think of as just coincidences.
Yeah.
But once you become a light worker, you realize, no, that really wasn't a coincidence.
Yep. Yeah. And
now, that doesn't mean that in every case, like when the person called me, I could have said, no, I'm just going to stay here.
No, you kept saying yes.
But I kept saying yes.
That's right. Yeah. And that's kind of one of the big keys, isn't it? Or, one of the things that are helpful to show source energy that you're listening and willing.
Yeah, and I think, some of that along there is the fact that I'm a claircog. And, I have been since I was, a kid.
Well, see, now there.
but didn't know it.
Well, and so.
Because it was always just, I got a great idea.
Ah, yes.
It's always just been, that's a great idea. I think I'll go with that. Or, no, I don't like that idea. Well, so no one ever told me, no, that's not, you're just your imagination, or it never caused any problems for me. So I never, and because it wasn't something coming from spirit. It was something coming from my mind.
Right. Where at the time it was all, I mean, it was all you in terms of how you thought about it.
Yeah, which it still is.
Well, and it's yeah, I suppose it is. And there's an attribution that many of us give, thinking that, well, that just popped into my head, as opposed to something that that I've been planning or that's really related to other. Well, I don't know. Even for me, when I ask questions, they're always answered. I'm a lot more careful with the questions I ask sometimes as a result. Sometimes I'm not sure I want the answer just yet. And it doesn't come to me always in words or through journaling. It's life experience. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But so the claircog part, when you say that it's in the form of an idea, can you think of any examples? And I know I'm putting you on the spot with this, so if you can't, that's, that happens often to me.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, probably one would have been the thing I talked before about the foreclosure.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah, you just knew it would all be fine.
It'd be fine, yeah.
There was
didn't know how when I said it, but I knew it'd be fine.
You ever have any experiences where you were compelled to do something that wasn't your norm, and because of it, you averted a potential problem? I've had many of those. That's why I'm asking. And you may not remember them because they're usually really small, but like, wow, I'm really glad that I didn't leave on time, because if I had, there was this accident right at the intersection I would have been at around that time that I am now waiting in traffic behind, but I'd much rather be here than there.
Yeah. I can't think of any.
Well, but
probably two minutes after we get off of this, I go, oh yeah, I remember that one.
You'll get a nice long list. Here are the 20 times that I remember specifically. I even made notes. Well, and so I'm curious in your. Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing about the claircog. Even now, is that I've been, I guess, living with it for so long that some people can tell when it's something coming from spirit and something was coming from their mind. I can't tell the difference.
I was thinking about this when we talked earlier about this topic about always being a light worker, in that there are how do you at some point, well, and maybe I should just go to, how did you finally find out? You said you went to a reading, and Marianne has said this, but there was something else that happened that made you realize, especially around your gift with energy.
Well, my gift with energy, someone told me.
Yeah. Well, and that's
basically
that's the big thing. It's like, if we're living, I mean, we live with ourselves. We're always us, right? And so it's really hard sometimes, I think. I think it's one of the reasons people really embrace the Lightworkers Lab too, is that they start to notice other people who have similar gifts that they didn't realize were gifts. But sometimes I think it's really hard to know what those gifts are unless they stand out quite a bit from the norm. But I also think a lot of us have just adapted to, okay, so I'm in an environment where this is a good skill to have, like intuition. Okay, so when I worked in HR, I interviewed people, and I did not realize at the time how many gifts I might have been utilizing. Not might have been, I was really intuitive, and I was good at choosing good candidates or recognizing when people weren't being particularly honest, and knowing what questions to ask them to get them to say more maybe than they had intended going into that interview. Could put people at ease, so they were just like, oh yeah, I could just say whatever to you. It's like, okay. I mean, I have some interesting examples of that, but I'm not going to go there. I'm curious about those types of things. It's like somebody told you had this, and then what happened? Do you remember? Like, was there a? Were you like, okay?
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
I can see you being like that.
I mean, it's like, well, this was probably close to 10 years after I'd had that reading. So I've been doing some things, going to, I'd had, I don't remember whether I'd had a class from Crystal Ann yet or not.
I'm trying to think.
I may have.
Okay. So it was
at
after.
that point.
Yeah. Because you had been doing a couple of other things since that reading, right? You had attended like the crystal, was it crystal healing? What was?
Well, there's a crystal class I go to once a month.
Right.
That, and then there's a healing group that I go to once a month.
And those are things that, did those happen before you were introduced to Crystal and the Lightworkers Lab?
Well, the crystal class definitely was, because I've been doing that for like 14 years now.
Awesome.
I'm not sure about the healing group. That's fairly new. So that may have been around the same time as Crystal Ann. I'm not sure.
Well, and then so somebody basically told you, what did they say?
Well, at the time, I'd gotten a session with them to do some energy work on me, and beforehand they did the thing where I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know, where you put your hands above somebody else's, so they're like that, to send energy and have the other person feel it. They did that with me, and they're sending to me. And I'm going, well, no, I don't really feel anything. And they said, well, send to me. And they said, wow, you're really strong. It's strong. I go, huh? Okay.
Wow. And I just love that. I love the fact that, you may never have noticed this if you hadn't have been with somebody who invited you to send energy to them. You might have just figured, I don't know, I'm just not, I don't get energy.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, you are energy and you have this like great ability to send it. And then you experimented with it, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. After that, it's like, we did a few different energies there. And then I just started thinking, okay, what else? Well, how about this? Or how about that? That was just the standard, earth, water, fire, air energies there. But then I think, well, why not a crystal, energy of a crystal, like an amethyst crystal or something like that. Send it from or like what I'm sending right now, the angelic realm.
And that whole really identifying something specific to focus on with the energy is just fascinating to me. And like, do you have to know what was the one you just used?
Angelic realm?
No, the crystal you just, like a particular crystal.
Amethyst.
Thank you.
Crystal.
Yes, heart chakra. Do you know what that energy is like before you send it, or do you just focus on amethyst?
I just focus on amethyst.
Yeah, which I love, because everything has an energy to it. And so it's like, you don't have to know it. You don't have to say, oh, this has that vibration within this frequency, and so therefore that is where I'm going to focus.
and in fact, if you want me to send you the energy of your Uncle Bill, I can do it. Never met him, don't know what it is, but I can send it to you.
Past, present, future?
Okay.
I don't have an Uncle Bill, so but I am thinking, if there are energy of my ancestors who I don't know their names, you can do that just by focusing on ancestors. Or if I say ancestors who have a particular, I don't know, ability of some sort, or the good ancestors.
Well, they're all good. They all served a purpose.
Yes, they all served a purpose.
The one that was executed for being a witch, and the one that was
the persecutor.
The persecutor that condemned someone as being a witch.
Yep.
You were both.
Yeah.
We all were.
Yep. Well, and so then you've also. Go ahead. You were going to say something else.
it's not bad. It's just that was an experience that you had to have.
Yes, and I appreciate your correcting me because I typically don't talk about them as good or bad, but I'm thinking if I have a pretty safe family, I think because I have a limited knowledge of my genealogy and historical background, it feels really safe. However, I am sure that there's somebody in there who was a big disruptor in one way, shape, or form. Now, if I don't want that energy, but I do want the nurturing energy of like a grandmother or two who have passed, then, it's like people can distinguish that and you can do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and so describe the connection between that and time for you, if there is a connection. So you and I have had a lot of conversations around time and parallel timelines, parallel universes, how does it all work? But there's an energy associated with that as well, right? Or is there?
Well,
are these distinct? Let's go that way.
We mean an energy that's time?
Yeah. And well, I mean, is there an energy to time? So if you want to repair a time, if you want to edit a timeline, is there an energy associated with that, or is that a completely different approach?
Well, everything is energy. So yes, you can use energy to do that.
It's something we haven't talked about before, and now I'm really curious because it's like, I want to talk more about this because I'm fine.
Well, I'd never thought about it before, so
me either. So I'm like, speaking off the cuff, always a dangerous thing for me. And it's like, oh wait, can you mash these two things together? Well, they are kind of. It's just a different way to consider energy, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, time is just a construct that we have in the 3D.
Yeah. Well, what I find fascinating, using myself as an example, is that I have an interesting repeating pattern around, let's call it chaos. Now, I also have a fascination with chaos and complexity. I've studied that topic, but not so much in my own life. And I find that there are times when things, like even this part of the year, where I would really enjoy more clarity as well as focus and organization. And I find a huge amount of disruption in very different areas of my life that aren't things that are necessarily within my control. And I know we all, like the whole thing about control is an illusion as well, but that there are some things that I can influence differently. And I think about time and how it feels rushed to the point where, like, a sense of lack and I don't have enough time and I'm never going to get anything done, kind of a negative Nelly approach, I suppose, because of that energy of that chaos and complexity. And when things are going really well, then that energy changes to calm, but almost sometimes too calm, where nothing gets done on that end because nothing new gets done. Does that make sense? So it's like there's the same old boring routine, and then there's like so much newness that it's like overwhelming, and everything in between. And so that's where time comes into the mix because of the energy for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let you roll with that.
Oh. What am I?
It's all you, Mark.
Oh no! You want me to say something?
And you don't have to. We have other things we can talk about too, but this was one that it just popped up, and it's like, well, that's a really interesting kind of, time and energy, and how do they interrelate? In that they are energy, but
well,
it's contrived, I suppose.
I mean, you've experienced things where an hour lasts for 3 or 4 hours sometimes, or sometimes an hour is like 10 minutes long.
Yep. Well, and I personally would like to, I don't like this word, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would like to manipulate that. I would like to be, from an energetic standpoint, I would like to say, okay, this is one of those hours that I'd like it to be 10 minutes. Or this one can drag on for 4 hours. I'm totally cool with that. It's like, that's my goal.
Of course, which is kind of the opposite of the way they usually work, because the ones that you want to be over in 10 minutes are the ones that drag on for 4 hours.
Yes.
It's like, oh, when is this going to be over?
Yep.
Or it's like, oh, this is over already?
So
I was really starting to enjoy this.
So when I work on my taxes, that's one that can be over in 10 minutes. Totally. It can feel like 10 minutes, and I'll be happy with that. Even if it takes 4 hours, if it feels like 10 minutes, I'll be good.
Yeah.
Of course, it'll probably take more than 4 hours, but it's like not the one that I want to extend day after day after day.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about from an energy standpoint, if sending energy to that future task might be a way to, it wouldn't be about time being longer or shorter, of course, but it might be what energy might be sent to make that a more, not a joyful necessarily, but a tolerable task.
Well, you send energy to make it flow easily.
So flowing energy for flow.
Yeah. So that it's because it's tedious, but if it moves, if you can do it smoothly and easily, then
right.
You get you at least feel like you get through quicker, because it's like, oh, okay, I didn't have to stop to figure this out, or I had to go look this up over there or something. If it goes smoothly, it's going to be seem a lot quicker than if you're having difficulties with it.
See, now I'm thinking we're on to something. So flow, there was a book called Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, going back to over a decade of reading that book. But, he's talking about it happens because you're engaged in your work. And what I'm thinking is that we are turning that upside down and saying we're going to make it, not make it, but we're going to influence the flow state by sending energy to it ahead of time so that it can be that, which to me is just, is it glowing over my head yet? Because I've got one of those, I don't think we need to dig in too much deeper, but this is an unexpected and cool topic, which, as many of you know, this is like one of my favorite things to talk about, especially with Mark. And I know we can go down rabbit holes, but that wasn't really the point of today's conversation. So, but thank you for going there. I am curious what others think. What do you think about, time and energy? How does it show up for you? And what are your perspectives on this? I think it would be really interesting to hear what your perspectives are. And we will both go back and look at those after the show. So you will be responded to. Did you want to say any more about that? Because there was another thing that you had said that you wanted to talk about a bit.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the other thing that you had mentioned, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay.
No.
You have, what I have on my list here is angel numbers.
Yeah. That's one of those things where, how do you know when a number is an angel number? There's ones that you see, 111, 222, 1010, or something, numbers like that. But what if you see a number 829?
Yep. Yeah.
You can look almost any number up as an angel number and you'll get something on it. But how do you know when you see a number that it's an angel number versus not an angel number?
I think that's an excellent question.
An example where it took me a while to figure it out, well, 12 hours actually.
That's really fast from a while. For me, that's weeks.
Yeah, well, because somebody had asked me what time it was in the morning. I looked at my watch and says, "Oh, it's 7:11." Mm-hmm. That's not the number that I had. I don't think it was. No, I don't think so. Anyway, 7:11. Didn't think anything of it. 12 hours later, I happen to look at my watch to see what time it is, and it's 7:11 again. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that one I saw this morning, along with this one, must be an angel number.
Oh, definitely. Well, but I think that's the big, I mean, I want you to answer your own
But
question, but is it when you start to notice that number repeating? Does it have to repeat to be an angel number too?
no, it doesn't have to. But and wait, if it doesn't repeat, well, maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was something that you needed to know then that is no longer
Hmm.
necessary.
So
Or maybe just seeing the number, even though you don't recognize it, had an effect of some kind.
maybe like little breadcrumbs, showing you the way
Breadcrumbs,
that you
yeah,
don't know you're following, but you are because there's a number.
yeah.
I can see. There's two things I wanted to mention. One is for those of you who aren't aware, there's a really awesome website called Joanne Sacred Scribes. It's not the only resource for numbers, but it goes up to like the 4,000s now, I think, in terms of
Wow.
meanings of numbers. It's a really great and free resource that I'll post when our show is done, so you can access it if you're not familiar with it. But so I look up numbers on there fairly regularly, and there are some though. I mean, what I find is a need to balance. Because every time I notice a number, I want to look it up, And it's like I think there's something
Yeah,
to be said for the intuitive aspects of it, but
yeah.
that because it's like I don't want to miss any messages,
Well, a little bit of information here. If it's important for you to know it, you won't miss it.
Yeah, it'll clobber me over the side of the head.
You'll get it again.
Yep. And so with angel numbers, I mean, do you look
As
them
it,
up regularly, or are they just points of recognition?
uh, for me, it's more points of recognition.
That angels are with you,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. I mean, I already know it. It's like, oh yeah, hi, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do that too. Actually, I don't do it with all of the numbers, but like today, I had at 11:11 gotten. I was looking at my phone at
Oh,
that time. I don't see the phone every time at 11:11 on certain
yeah.
days, but I didn't even realize. I mean, I knew today was January 11th, but I wasn't thinking about it in terms of the numbers. And then when I looked at the phone,
Oh,
it said January 11th, 11:11, and I'm like, oh, this is super cool. So I took a picture of it. I'm like, yes, please.
yeah.
Because I don't know what the message is specifically, but I'm happy to receive it. I do look,
Yeah.
I've noticed more numbers now because of that connection to angels and messages, and that it is often known to be one of the ways they communicate.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that wants to get like a system down, like,
Yeah. Well, here's a system for you. You set up alarms on your phone for 111, 222, 333,
well,
and so
there's,
on.
so, so it's
So,
like,
so
so it's a contrived way to connect with your angels, right? So it's like,
yeah.
hello, hi. Those are the numbers I get all the time.
Yeah.
It's more that like, oh, go ahead.
But I was gonna say, but of course that doesn't work. At
Oh,
that point, they're not really angel numbers.
it's 1:11 right now our time, so I'm going to take a picture of that because that's just
Oh.
hilarious that we're talking about it. Hello.
Yes, we're listening.
That's right, we sure are. Oh my gosh. No, there is a book that I have called Kitchen Table Tarot, and she breaks down all of the. I mean, there are all kinds of books out there, but I really like the way that she breaks down the numbers and then the different card, the arcanas and the majors and the minors and all that other stuff. But it kind of has brought me to this place of, well, if her ones are the same as her interpretation of the ones are kind of similar, but then the card suit or whatever is different. And so do ones always mean, I mean, Joanne Sacred Scribe stuff about ones and this person's idea about ones may be slightly different, but do ones typically mean something from an angelic standpoint versus twos or fours? So if I get 4343 on my dashboard in my car, can I just think, oh yeah, fours mean this and threes mean this, and they're doubled, so it's really intense right now. Or, I mean, I kind of wanted, it's like, and I'm not like a scientist. I mean, yes, I have like a research background, but it's like, I am feeling so compelled to create that kind of system where it's like, oh, and a part of it is because I think that I am disconnected from the intuitive aspect of the numbers because there are places to look them up. And it's like, I kind of want to know what they're trying to say because I feel like I'm thick and that I'm just not getting it half the time.
Well, the same number can have different meanings for different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can look up, this is what this person got, and maybe that's right for you, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part.
And yeah,
What does it mean to me?
Yeah, and that's the same thing with crystals. Because someone can come up and says, "Oh, this crystal is good for doing this helping you with this type of thing." Well, yeah, and maybe that is true for maybe the majority of people, but maybe for someone else, it helps with something else.
I think
has a different effect.
I think you helped explain my interest in figuring out a system. Is that how it often has worked for me? Is I learn the rules and then I learn how to break them for me. I mean, not break them all, but it's like, so when I guess an example is chakras. There's a general consensus of what colors the chakras are, like root is red and sacral is orange and so on. But then some people have said, well, it's not always that for everybody. It's really important to recognize what color is it for you. And so like one of my friends, her heart chakra is not the conventional like emerald green. It's like a very bright, vibrant lime green. But she's recognized that for herself. For me, though, it's almost like I feel like the structure is important to understand before branching out. That's for me. I mean, nobody else needs that rule. I made that rule for myself for some unknown reason that I cannot explain. And it's like, that's just becoming an awareness for me. Like maybe that's why. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, it's almost like a chicken and the egg type of thing. Because so-and-so said that the root chakra is red, you're not thinking, okay, my root chakra is red, and so it shows up as red.
I think for me, there's an element of rebellion, and I can't rebel unless I know what I'm rebelling against.
Yeah. But, so is it red because they said it's red, or is it red, and then the other person says, yeah, it's red because that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, who's to prove that everybody's chakra is red?
Red, yes.
At this point, we're not at that level. And I'd say even then they couldn't prove it because you have to test all people. It's like you may have tested a sample of 25 people and all of them say their root chakras are red, but that doesn't mean that the 26th has that same thing. And that generalization is often taken as fact for everybody. And but I like the idea of sitting with the numbers, like important numbers to me. 14 is a big one. Always has been, continues to be. It's the date of my birthday, but it's also the date of my daughter's birthday. But it was, and I think that has something to do with it, especially, it being my birthday, it's always been important. But why is it important? And I get a lot of 14s from the angels, and I get 1444s and.
Yeah. So my birthday's on the 14th also.
Is it really? Oh, funny.
Yeah.
See? And so has everybody I've talked to. No, not really. I knew there was something I liked about that number. See, and my driver's license or my license plate has 14 in it. And it was like, I had no control over that, but it came back 014. And I'm like, awesome. I can remember that, I seriously thought it was just a gift from the universe. It's like, okay, here you go. And I do think there's an element of, I don't know, just those, my master number is 5 and 14, when you add the two together is 5. That takes us into numerology in general, and it's a topic I am interested in but don't know much about.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you know about it? Do you ever, I'm wondering from a software engineering standpoint too, because is there a numerical element to that?
to numerical element to what?
I don't know, the work in itself. Are you programming as a software engineer, or so you have the zeros and ones and things like that, but
I'm not quite sure if I'm.
Well, that's okay, because I'm not quite sure what I'm asking. So, you know what I'm going to do is there are a couple of comments that have shown up that I want to read, because I don't know. Oh, that's from the same person, but I don't have your permission specifically to share it with the world. So I'm just going to read them, but not your name. Okay. So 111 today. Her husband's birthday. I've been getting numbers for several years now after my kitty Max's passing last week, and I'm sorry to hear that. That's always such a bummer. I've been getting 111, 1111, and 444, and she's heard 1s and 4s are from him, so it helps with her pain, and she misses him dearly. And I love that connection. It's interesting you say that. Both my grandmother and grandfather on one side had one. The grandmother's birthday was on the 4th, and my grandfather's was on the 4th. So there's another element of 4 there. And that same person had said, funny, we're talking about root chakra. I just unwrapped my new root chakra singing bowl. Cool. I love that. I had a conversation with somebody recently who had talked about the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, and then something around sea turtles had popped up. And then just the other day, a friend who was out of town during the holidays had purchased a couple of gifts for me, including this really cool kind of compass, a pewter compass, and a sea turtle. And she did that before this conversation, and I was like laughing, because I'm like, that is so cool, thank you. It's like, I love those types of experiences, those serendipities that happen.
Yeah.
Including like your and my birthday being on the 14th.
Yeah.
Wow. So anything else you'd like to add around angel numbers?
No, I can't think of anything right now.
I think that to me, I don't know that I've always paid attention to numbers when they came in, in a like 333. I might have thought it before, joining the Lightworkers Lab and calling myself a Lightworker, but I don't know that it really held much importance to me when I would notice them. I'd think they were happy coincidences, but wouldn't necessarily think of them as messages from people who have passed or from our angels or whatever. I've just always thought, oh, interesting, or 1, 2, 3, 4. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good thing. It's interesting to start to notice, like, well, I did start to pay attention to them after I was introduced to the world of energy and energetics, which was before I joined the Lightworkers Lab. All of a sudden, I just started noticing them. It wasn't like they taught that, it was just me like, oh, how interesting that I keep seeing those same numbers over and over again. And then it was really once I started in the Lightworkers Lab that I started to make that connection between messages and those numbers, and that they can be interpreted. It didn't really occur to me to interpret them before then.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's a path to numbers and just awareness of them, just like with everything else.
Yeah. So just maybe a side note on messages. We were talking about numbers. Other things can be messages too. Colors. I mean, of course, who hasn't found a coin on the ground or something?
Yes.
They could be a message. That's something you typically think of, or a butterfly. That's a particular color. I mean,
or just butterflies.
Or just butterflies. Yeah, but things are a little more. Who would have thought of color?
Yeah. Well,
being a message, but it can be.
Do you have any examples of that? Well, you said like a certain color of butterfly.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, just I forget what it was, but I saw the color blue a while back,
Mhm.
and I go, "Oh, yeah, that's because of this." I knew that it wasn't really. I don't remember what it was now at all, but I just remember that, and it was. I don't even remember where I saw the blue, but it wasn't, in
Well,
anything unusual, so to speak.
sure. I mean, an example I have, oh, somebody said they get songs as messages. Me too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
All the time. That actually is probably
yeah,
one of the biggest avenues of messages for me. In fact, lately they've been going through my head, and it's like sometimes I just get sticky songs in my head. But there was one I woke up with. Now I can't remember what it was. Of course, it'll come back to me after the show and then stick in my head for another 3 days. But it was following. I mean, I just woke up with this song in my head, and it made me feel really good because it was a positive message song and not one that I
yeah,
listen to. I mean, I know it, but it's not like I've just listened to it on Spotify or something. It's something from like the 80s, you know? And
yeah.
it's like, oh, I love this message. The color one, there's somebody else who shared this same kind of recognition in that that I started to notice the potential for additional chakras, one in between the solar plexus and the heart, and the other between the heart and the neck. And I was really honing in on what those colors might be, but then also what they may mean. And so that lime green color that I mentioned my friend associates with the heart chakra, for me is kind of like an action chakra, and that's the solar plexus to the heart.
Yeah.
And then the one in between the heart and the throat for me is like a joy chakra, and the color is teal. And I hadn't seen much teal at all. It was the color that showed up when I was meditating. And now I see it all over the place, everywhere I go, but not all the time. It's almost like when I'm kind of grouchy. And then I get the teal. It's like, okay, joy, you're right. Reconnect with joy. And I like that. It's nice to have, but it just to me helps to exemplify the color as a message. And I think anything
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
I mean, people associate different things with different animals, and like there's a whole, many books on
Oh,
that, and insects and things like that.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just now it's all going through me like 50 million things that I want to say at once. What I will read is somebody has said my life has a soundtrack. Yes. Well, and Ally McBeal, some of you may be too young to know this show, but it was just they had a soundtrack, I think, to her life in general. I mean, there was always a at least as I remember it, there was a soundtrack that reflected her experiences. And I've always
Yeah.
really liked that approach. I don't know what my soundtrack would be. There's a wide variety of music that I connect to. And so I think it would be a fun exercise to think of that. What would my soundtrack be? Just like people say, what would your word be? Or if you were, an animal, what would be your animal? What is your soundtrack? That'd be really cool. Be cool to share. Do you have one?
Yeah.
I want to say her name, but I don't know that she gave permission to share this across the board. So, it's like, oh, after the show, I will respond to that person with the soundtrack. And with that, we have like 4 minutes left. So, is there anything else you wanted to add, Mark, before we say ta-ta for now?
No, I can't think of anything.
Well, it's always a pleasure
I
to
think
have you on the show. I love our conversations. I know they go all over the place. And
yeah.
yeah.
Well, why not?
I know. And it's just, I think that, for those of you who haven't seen previous conversations Mark and I have had, they'd be really cool to check out. At the beginning of the show, I listed the dates. I don't have those on this screen to be able to share again, but if you check those out, you'll learn a lot more about Mark's spiritual journey, how he Well, a lot of the things that he's done in his life, including visiting the earth chakras, which are pretty fascinating in and of themselves, and then the conversation with him and his wife, Marianne, as well. So they're really fun conversations. And I just want to thank you again, Mark, for being here today and sharing your perspectives with us. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's watching. I wish you all a wonderful, magical, mystical weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.